Welcome to the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom Consent Counts Committee Tabling Training. I'm Susan Wright, and I am the chairperson of Consent Counts, as well as the executive director for the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. Before we begin, there's a few things we'd like to get out of the way. First of all, NCSF's reputation must be spotless to do the work that we do. And so we have to have our Consent Counts volunteers have a reputation above reproach. So we do vet our volunteers through our incident reporting and response. And some of the things that would disqualify you are consent violations, predatory behavior, outing and doxing, group or event bans, or discriminating or harassing behavior in person or online. And now would be the time to disclose any issues you may have had and discuss them with Tess Zachary, our chairperson, and myself. Reports coming in to us after your appointment will also exclude you. So what does a Consent Counts volunteer do? Consent Counts volunteers will be able to educate your local communities about consent for kink and non-monogamy and discuss the resources that Consent Counts offers. Consent Counts volunteers are not speaking for the NCSF. You are speaking about the Consent Counts program. And this also takes the pressure off of tablers. You don't have to know everything that NCSF does. We just want you to be really familiar with Consent Counts. So our goals for Consent Counts volunteers, while you're educating your local and regional communities about consent counts, we want you to inform them about consent for kink through explicit prior permission, along with our lobbying project. We also want you to educate about consent for non-monogamy. We would like you to inform individuals as well as community organizers about our consent resources. Most of those are found under Consent Counts, but also our incident reporting and response, our kink and polyamory aware professionals, and our NCSF education outreach program consent workshops. So let's talk about that a little bit. Expectations of our Consent Counts tabler is be polite and courteous to event staff and attendees. Please dress appropriately for the event. It's important to remember that we are a professional organization, so we need to be very neat in appearance and project a professional image when we're tabling. So that means at a leather event, you want to dress in leather, but more formal leather rather than casual lingerie. I think this next bullet is very important. Please don't speak ill of any NCSF constituencies, NCSF programs, NCSF staff, or volunteers. We hear about it and we will know, and it really is a very bad look to have one of our volunteers out there talking down one of our programs or our staff. So if you have any problem, come to Tess or myself and we will discuss it directly. Please also be at the table or have somebody at the table at all designated times. We have actually lost events because the tabler was not at the table at the designated time, and that ruins our reputation. It makes it very difficult for us to get back into the good graces of that event. And lastly, please fill out the event report soon after returning. That's where you can put things like somebody's name and who they're with and their phone number and say, Susan or Tess, get hold of this person, please. They're interested in lobbying, or they're a district attorney or organizer. This organizer is very interested in getting in touch with us. I've referred them to your email, but here they are. It's just so we know what's happening at your event. Also, if there's any issues that kind of come up or being discussed, it kind of helps us keep tabs of what's happening in the community. So, of course, be polite and courteous to event staff and attendees. Even if you show up and there's no table like there was supposed to be, call us and we'll deal with it. It's also really important that Consent Counts volunteers stay on message about explicit prior permission. It's never okay to undermine this legal framework. Most of our resources are guidelines that are intended to be adapted for specific situations. However, some things are really hard and fast, like explicit prior permission. So we're telling people what explicit prior permission means and how to apply it. So we all need to be on the same page about that. So that's why we keep going over that. And if somebody disagrees with explicit prior permission, please bring it to myself or Tess so we can help respond, particularly with the pending effort around explicit prior permission. it's really important to behave professionally and appropriately. So, if somebody's trying to argue with you about explicit prior permission or has a real problem with one issue, it's just best to, smile and pass them on to the people who can discuss that with them more in depth. Because your behavior there in person and online does reflect on consent counts. We want to keep a nice professional demeanor, and we don't want you to have to get in the weeds either to deal with these things. So part of all of this is staying up to date. This is why we're Consent Counts volunteers. We want you to stay involved with the monthly meetings, to read the minutes, to engage in the work that we're doing in Consent Counts in terms of revising materials and our upcoming lobbying training. It's important because we'll be doing this legislative work and the messaging matters, and we have to all work together and not undermine each other. So here's the first of the brief overviews of the different programs that I mentioned earlier. Consent Counts. This is our committee. So you all probably know quite a bit about consent counts. We're here to decriminalize sexual conduct between consenting adults. And as part of this, we do education, we spread the need for consent. And one of the chief goals was to decriminalize consensual BDSM. And that always included the caveat that does not include serious physical injury. So this is the table of contents for consent counts. We've got our best practices. That's always really good to know, the public policy papers, and then further down the guides for groups. But let's go over explicit prior permission. You have to know this. And this is regardless of the constituency. Even if you're going to non-monogamy or swing lifestyle conferences, remember the Debbie Herbernick prevalence survey that found that at least 30% of adults in America engage in some sort of spanking, role play, or bondage, but less than 4% have ever attended a kink workshop or event. So you're going to be encountering people, a lot of people, who do this in their own private lives, but they're not part of the kink communities. And this messaging is really important, especially this year and next year, as the model penal code is going to be published, likely in the fall. And at that point, we will really pivot in our lobbying efforts because we've been laying the groundwork up until now. So be very familiar with the history and the practical applications of EPP in our community. And I'm going to share some resources to help you. The first thing that is really great is 5 quick steps to get explicit prior permission for consent to kink. And so these different bubbles, and this is our postcard, our palm card that has the rainbow hand on the front and the 5 steps on the back. And at the very top of the consent counts page, the 5 bubbles are there too. So you can send people a link, you can take the materials and use this to explain explicit prior permission. And the way we crunch that down, did you agree to the specific acts that you're going to do together before you did it, including if there's going to be any sexual contact, like touching the breasts or genitals? The sexual contact is very important to include if you're going to include any kind of force or restraint or have a DS relationship. The second bubble in the middle is everyone an adult and able to consent. So that means they're not under the influence, they're not in subspace, they're not having a mental health crisis, or some other kind of significant reduction in capacity. And the third of the top bubbles is, did you discuss the risks and agree how intense the acts will be? And as part of this, we have to note again, you can't cause serious physical injury, even if somebody consents to the act. So there is limits to this. Down on the bottom, do you have a way to stop at any time, even if you're doing consensual non-consent, like a safe word or safe signal? And of course, some people just use plain language. But if you're role playing, it's very helpful to have that safe signal so it can't be misunderstood, or safe word. And then, of course, what verbal or physical resistance is okay to engage in during role play or power exchange, keeping in mind you still can stop at any time. And please do take a look. This is our video on it. It's half an hour and it's just on explicit prior permission. It kind of covers the context of explicit prior permission, the history of this project that started, well, Consent Counts started way back in 2006, but the ALI project started in 2015. So please do take a look at this. It's got a really interesting video embedded in it from Erin Murphy, who's with the American Law Institute, who summarizes the BDSM bondage section. So just for that alone, it's fabulous to take a look at and refer others. So specific to the lobbying on the consent counts page as compared to the educational information we have the 11 public policy papers where you can do outreach in your state. And we have the EPP summary that can be used in states where we don't have the public policy paper. We also have talking points about explicit prior permission that you should definitely take a look at. They're just little blurbs that you can actually say when people are asking you about it. Different ways that you and the communities can publicize explicit prior permission, and more background on the American Law Institute project. And these are the different public policy papers that we have, the different states. And if you're from a state where we don't have one, where we really need to do is we need to reach out to allies. We need to find attorneys who can help us create more of these papers. So some of the legal issues that NCSF deals with is we file NCSF briefs in criminal cases as well as civil rights cases. We filed a brief with our allies against the SESTA laws because we knew it was going to be deplatforming sex educators and therapists, and it has, unfortunately. We file in consent legal cases. We've gathered the case law and the law review articles on consent in a kink context. That's linked on our website. So if you're ever talking to an attorney or somebody who's really interested in the legal side of things, you can send them straight there to find all of the background on consent to BDSM in a legal context. And then the legal resources page includes information on sexual choking, interrogatories that defense attorneys and prosecutors can use to ask about kink in a non-stigmatizing way. And we have papers on kink in the UCMJ and non-monogamy in the UCMJ. Next up, we have education for groups within our communities, and that's on our consent counts page under guides for groups, events, and clubs. Under that, we have things like our sample consent policies and procedures. We have a guide for coming up with outing policies and procedures. We have the consent response team information where we can help groups set up their own team or train their volunteers. A big one lately is liability issues for groups and events. We also have things like where to draw the line, dealing with consent incidents for groups. And then for individuals, it's sort of the same thing, dealing with consent. We've got the two main brochures, which is Got Consent for kink and Got Consent for non-monogamy, along with that explicit prior permission card with the hand. Those are excellent brochures to take when you're tabling. It's really important. We also have our new IPV tactics matrix for the kink community that we created with the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. And then we have all sorts of guides, the red flags article, the negotiation guide. It's just one-page guide and deals with one-on-one. What do we want to do right now, rather than what do I like to do and what's okay in general. And then we have other documents. We're working on the Is This Assault, and that should be up soon. Dealing with assault, the BDSM versus assault wallet card, and other educational information. We also have research on consent. Our 2025 consent survey is nearing the end at this point in June. So hopefully we'll have that information out to you soon. We also have our service professional survey, which found that consent was the most important thing that service professionals need to know about. And then we have here under our research page, the two other consent surveys, the 2020 and the 2025, as well as the consent count survey in 2012 that's kicked this all off for us in trying to figure out what our communities think about consent and what the issues are. And we've published 22 papers so far since 2006. Now, I want to share at this point just a little bit of the traps. We'll do a couple of these. Some people may have a problem with explicit prior permission because certain kinks are not covered under explicit prior permission. Things like sexual choking can actually cause death. Things that can cause a permanent serious disfigurement, a serious cutting that gets infected. So some people have an issue with this, but up until now, almost no impact play or restraint is allowed under law. That's why they say consent is not a defense, because even slight reddening of the skin is illegal. So we've moved the bar way far over to what I think everybody would generally agree is serious injury and should be considered as an issue. So this permanent serious disfigurement, we also get questions about that. It doesn't mean you have a keloid or a small scar. It's for big things. Branding often can get infected or cause necrotic skin, and that can cause serious health risk, a lot of time and money to treat, and leaves a disfigured patch there, which is why branding is also not a kink that's covered under explicit prior permission. But typically, the person who affected would have to complain that it's a disfigurement. If they get a decorative cutting and they love it, that's not a disfigurement. If it gets infected and needs a lot of health care to deal with it, then it can become a disfigurement. So consent counts is also working within the justice system. And a lot of people kind of ask us why we're doing that, but that's the system we're trying to change. It's very similar to the things that we did with the American Psychiatric Association when we worked with them to make them change their criteria to say that being kinky doesn't automatically mean that you're mentally ill. So our job is to make institutional and systemic change. That's what NCSF is here to do. So if we can get the justice system to acknowledge that affirmative consent for kink through explicit prior permission, then it's a real solid change that can be credited to the kink communities and will actually kind of further the whole concept of consent for the mainstream population. So one of our other programs that I mentioned was Kink Aware Professionals. And this is a free database of professionals who offer sex positive support for kink and non-monogamy. So this includes mental health, legal, medical, and other professionals who are knowledgeable about consent, and they can offer services such as mediators to help individuals resolve interpersonal disputes. We have trauma-informed counselors that we can refer people to if they're reporting a consent violation. We have civil attorneys to assist survivors in getting assistance with medical bills, pain and suffering, and lost work. And we have criminal defense attorneys to assist those who have been accused of consent violations. Incident reporting and response is another program we have that helps with consent. IRR helps hundreds of individuals, groups, and businesses every year who need assistance with taking reports of a consent violation or sexual assault, creating a consent policy, or setting up procedures on how to take reports. And that's where you can find information on incident reporting and response. We have our annual and quarterly reports that outline kind of what the trends are that's happening in our communities. For groups, occasionally NCSF will take reports for our member groups if they're developing procedures on how to take reports of consent violations on their own. And also, sometimes someone will want to report to a neutral third party who can provide resources and referrals to trauma-informed counselors. So NCSF will often take a report from somebody who's also reported to groups. We really enjoy helping groups with their consent policies and training their consent response teams and reporting practices, because that's what's changing the consent culture in the kink communities. NCSF group members who want to participate in this IRR process have to sign a confidentiality agreement. And so while everyone should understand that, NCSF puts ourselves at risk when we're helping our member groups. So it's very important that we have a clear understanding, which is why we'll help groups who are not members set up their consent policies and procedures. But if we start getting to the point of taking or talking about reports that the group is receiving, we really want to have a confidentiality agreement in place and have them be a member. For additional IRR information, we do share best practices and resources so that groups can create their own systems. But as a national organization, we really can't understand the consent culture of each organization or even the local community. So we don't adjudicate, we don't investigate, we don't mediate between groups or individuals on any particular report or person. We are here as a very neutral, here's what we've learned, here's the best practices, here's what we've seen work. We also have to really maintain confidentiality as part of that, since we're taking reports. So incident reporting and response is heavily siloed, so that in no circumstances will the same person talk to both sides of an individual consent violation report. That's to avoid any kind of unconscious bias. We're just here to provide referrals and resources to give people our advice on both sides. Well, here's what we recommend you do, or here's options of what you can do. So we also don't want to somehow inadvertently expose their information across those lines. So when people come to you, be empathetic. They will maybe want to sit there and talk to you about their consent violation report, but refer them to incident reporting and response. Make sure that they know this resource exists. Ask at the event. It's actually really good to ask before you even start to table, what the events reporting process is so that you can pass that on to people who come to you with maybe an issue that they're having there. They can be very complicated, very messy. You might only be seeing one fraction of a side. So please don't comment to other people, give a mental health diagnosis or advice, even if you're qualified to do so, because you're there tabling as an NCSF consent counts tabler. Refer them to IRR and we will provide them what they need. And sometimes these things really heat up and go public, like even at the event, and everybody's talking about it and coming up and asking. Please speak as though everything that you're going to say is going to be put on social media and credited to NCSF. NCSF said this about this big blow up, because they love doing that. They probably will do that. Again, there's a little bit of about IRR. You'll hear somebody say NCSF blacklist, NCSF ban list. How can I consult your ban list? We don't have a ban list. We don't tell groups and events who to ban, and we actually don't hold events, so we don't have a ban list. We produce workshops at other people's events, so we can't possibly be an expert in every region. Also, you'll hear people say, well, don't they deserve to know what they're accused of? Reporters deserve confidentiality and respect. And so someone who's been reported does not deserve this information from NCSF. We're not deciding their fate in any way. So they have no need to have us investigate, talk to them, and they won't receive it. So don't comment on specific information, reports, or people, even if you personally know, because it's going to be taken as NCSF. And here's some IRR traps. We don't want to leave anybody with the impression that you're taking a consent violation report at the table. We don't ever do that. Even if a member of our IRR team is there, we refer them to IRR because we try to gather the information about what's happening. That's just as important as helping the people, because we need to know what's going on in our communities. But because we talk about consent, you will get people who come up and really share a lot of personal information. And definitely we want you to be empathetic and compassionate, but you need to make sure that they understand that that's not a report, that they do have to share this information with IRR, and they can share as much or little as they want to. But, the IRR staff is trained to gather and provide these appropriate resources. And frankly, we have a lot of information that's behind the scenes that you just won't have access to. And this IRR activity does need to be documented by us. Okay, so the next program that I said offers consent resources is our education outreach program. So what we do is we provide education for professionals about consent and the alt-sex communities, including continuing legal education for attorneys and continuing education units for mental health professionals. We provide education for members of the BDSM, leather fetish, swing and polyamory communities, furry communities, pup communities about consent and the legal issues that may affect them. And we assist in the support and outreach and education efforts of groups, clubs, and events to their local authority, law enforcement, and service agencies. So when I mentioned that NCSF doesn't hold our own events, we work with other groups. If another group is really interested in hosting one of our workshops, that's what NCSF does. And here are our virtual presentations. Some of these can also be in person if one of the presenters is actually in the area. We've got Meet the NCSF, and that's sort of a presentation like this where we talk about the different resources for people and groups. Got Consent, which is a webinar on consent for individuals and groups so that individuals understand what groups are having to deal with and how they can help their groups get consent policies and procedures that work for their group. We also discuss negotiation and dealing with consent incidents and legal issues. We have a consent social. We sometimes call that a consent mixer because it's kind of a bingo, social, interactive thing. It works great before a party. We have a virtual consent workshop, which is an interactive exercise that will help a group create their own virtual consent policy. That's for being able to interact online. And that actually works for kind of Discord groups as well. We have key concepts for clubs. Anybody who's interested in opening a group or club needs to look at that. Dealing with consent incidents, that's how to form a consent response team, how to deal with these things, how to take these reports. And then the consent legal issues and liability risks. And We are seeing a lot more liability issues in our communities, and we suggest that groups and events have policies and procedures that can protect themselves. And it's also something that individuals need to be aware of because they're also having to pay out in case of injury. So, for our professional presentations, we do interpersonal violence versus BDSM. We do providing culturally competent client services to the kink communities as well as the consensual non monogamy communities. And these are things like group practices of therapists. And we also provide information on consent and kink on college campuses. And we just recently updated that with more resources for college campuses and how to get kink educators to help them do that. So now for our education, this is what the form we want people to fill out. So send them to this form under the Education Outreach Project, under our programs on our website. We present or exhibit at 60 events, groups, colleges, professional organizations a year. Primarily, we're doing it for our own communities, but we're also doing increasing numbers for professionals. So any professional that you end up talking to, that's great because that's a ripple effect. If we can work with a professional, we can often educate other professionals. And we can tailor these for each group, whatever their needs are. This outline is just kind of a starting point because our education outreach is very busy and we're also busy making materials. This is one thing that the consent counts help produce, but it's hosted on the education outreach program page. It's down at the very bottom. It's our Creative Commons presentations. And we have the explicit prior permission Creative Commons. So other educators, if they're like, oh, wow, this is really interesting information about explicit prior permission, say, hey, we've got the slides all ready for you with the information that you can pull and use in your own workshops. We also have the Choking Creative Commons slides that we put together based on our Choking Laws, Liability, and Health Risks workshop that we were kind of including in the liability workshop. And this is also slides with all of our research and the recent research on sexual choking that we encourage educators to consult and use in their own education. And so moving on to the materials, this is something that you should know how to do and teach others how to do. We have a constant flow in and out of materials, and it lets people know all the resources that NCSF has. So the materials order form is available to everyone free of charge. It has all of our brochures and postcards, as you can see, and you can actually look at the brochures. And then under the download link on the front page, you can also send a link to people. Other things on the Order NCSF materials menu are our consent signs and our social media graphics that we post, and we encourage everybody else to post. This page has over 50 ever rotating social media graphics and all of our consent signs that were created by the EOP and the PR committee. And then if the group or event wants materials for event bags, we have certain palm cards that we order in a larger volume for bag stuffing. We like doing that. These are the 3 that we have, and you can indicate that they're for bag stuffing rather than order from the front page. That way we can send you hundreds of these if needed. NCSF also has a tabling page for you with quick links, scripts, everything you might need at hand. And it even shows how to set up the table. Table runner in the red, that's the NCSF table runner. You all will be getting a consent counts with National Coalition for Sexual Freedom under it as a table runner. And when you order your materials, just put in the notes, I am a consent counts volunteer and I need a banner. So here's the tabling page. Everything you need. Look at everything we've been talking about. Tabling guide, guides for groups, the elevator pitch, which is the quick pitch, quick scripts. If you're asked to jump up on stage or stand up in front of the munch, we've even got a 3-minute speech. It's very easy, the different points that we want you to talk about with NCSF. So we gather it all here on the tabling page for you. And one of the things we have is the quick program outline of these different programs that we went through: the Consent Counts Education Outreach Program, Kink Aware Professionals, Incident Reporting and Response. And we also have the Media Outreach Project there at the bottom. We offer resources for media and groups and individuals who'd like to speak out. And we're seeing more media coverage, and likely that will increase. We also have the brand new, the third bullet there, the Freedom and Privacy Project. This is also something that's heating up, which is local authorities trying to apply sexually oriented business laws and come up with a new regulation that's called the Absolute Prohibition of Live Sex Act ordinances. And these are affecting not only swing clubs, but kink groups. And we even saw one hit the media recently and it became quite a big story. So the Freedom and Privacy Project has a lot of legal information. And if you hear of a group or event having issues with their local authorities, please definitely let us know because we can't help unless we know. And then here we're back to some traps while tabling. Sometimes you might get somebody who wants to complain about NCSF, either our policies or decisions or our history. We've been around for quite a long time. But please just keep it positive and say, I think you just need to send an email to NCS Freedom at ncsfreedom.org. You can let them know that 5 people receive this email. It's not going to just disappear into the ether, so we'll route it properly. And keep in mind that as bad as some things sound, things get blown up. I mean, the rumors that get back to me, I'm just like, whoa, okay, interesting. So people will either inflate things or they'll only tell a part of a story or omit relevant facts. So don't be quick to jump to conclusions or agree with somebody because you don't want them going out and saying, oh, this NCSF staff even agrees they're so terrible, right? Just say, that sounds like a concern. I definitely want you to have your concerns heard. Things take this to our executive committee so they can address it. This sounds distressing. Please reach out to the executive committee so they can help you. And the NCS Freedom at ncsfreedom.org is the best email to give out to everybody, especially if you don't know who this needs to go to, so we can make sure it gets to the right person. You can also receive reimbursements for expenses that are approved by myself or Tess. And these are things like if you have a parking expense or something like that. We also love for you to buy candy, including sugar-free candy. Definitely, if you're putting out sugar-free and sugared candy, put each kind in a different bowl, and we do not want to accidentally cause a medical emergency. So clearly label the candy bowls so that people know and they don't commingle. But it's great. People come over to get the candy and they'll stand there to chat. And you can get this reimbursement when you fill out the event report right after the event. So while you're tabling at the event, we mark down what events you're going to be at, what date it is, because myself or Tess want to be available in case you call us. Our contact information is on the tabling page. If you get stuck, please don't give the public our personal numbers. There's the NCSF phone number on the back of each brochure, so you can give them that. And then that way we can respond appropriately. If you do have a problematic person, if it becomes an issue, they're really onto something about NCSF, you can call us and put us on the phone, but that really rarely ever happens. It's just kind of, we want to give everybody the escape hatch if you need to. So you can absolutely directly pass somebody on to us or take their number and call us and say, this person is standing here waiting for your call, and we'll call them. And you will receive an email prior to the event to make sure that you understand the specific contact information in your tabling hours. A lot of you will be setting this up yourself, so you'll be informing us of that, which we really appreciate. If you want an NCSF t-shirt, that's a great way to represent us while you're tabling, and this is our shopping link. And just a reminder, we have only shown you a small portion of what Consent Counts and the NCSF has to offer to our community. So spend some time on our website so you know where these things are that I just discussed and find resources that you didn't even know that we had. You don't have to know about all of this, but it's helpful to kind of get a lay of the land so you can point people in the right direction. And remember, we're just an email away, ncsfreedom at ncsfreedom.org. And if people want to get involved, they say, wow, this looks really cool. We have lots of ways that they can get involved. They can join as a member of NCSF, either individuals or as a group. They can donate to NCSF. All of our funds come from the kink and non-monogamy communities. We don't get grants. All of our staff is volunteer. None of us get paid. So we have very low overhead, but it takes our community support to survive. So we really encourage people to do fundraisers. They can volunteer just like you are with the Consent Counts Committee, the PR Committee, the Education Outreach Committee. We have different ways that they can spread the word about NCSF. And you can also give them the shopping link so that they can buy their own t-shirt. And definitely, if they are a professional, refer them to our CAP list. We are always trying to sign up people on our CAP list. And that's another great postcard or brochure to have, especially if you know there's going to be a number of professionals there. So thank you very much for your time and attention. We really appreciate that you're going to be tabling for the Consent Counts Committee.